Trump warded off war. His actions already are war crimes. Blockades are acts of war. And let's recall John Locke's State of War from 1670. Let's go into what Donald Trump offered us instead, his preposterous economic claims. And there he was.
What a difference a year makes. In addition, I'm doing what no politician of either party has ever done, standing up to the special interests to dramatically reduce the price of prescription drugs. I negotiated directly with the drug companies and foreign nations, which were taking advantage of our country for many decades, to slash prices on drugs and pharmaceuticals by as much as 400, 500, and even 600%. Why?
What is that? Well, that ought to give you an indication. Your alarm bells are probably going off because you watch David Knight's show, because you travel in these circles with us. We're kindred spirits. When you hear him say, we drop prescription drug prices 400, 500, 600%, we negotiated those down. What's he really saying? That's lingo for price caps on Medicare and Medicaid purchases of drugs. And what's the secondary thing? If you follow and ask the next question, as F. Paul Wilson would say, if you ask the next question, which is, where are the prescription drug makers going to make up for that loss from the price caps on those government-run fascist systems? Well, of course, they will raise their prices in any free market area where they can. So Donald Trump did not reduce. If you're not on Medicare or Medicaid, he didn't reduce your prescription drug prices at all. Did he mention that? Of course he didn't mention that. He wants people to think something that is not real. He's lying by omission. Right there. That tells you something. And that comes as we start with that and backtrack into some of his economic claims. And that is our start. The economic claims, apart from the fact that he backed off of Venezuela. Here is some of the information that we've got in the news notes right at the start. Word from D.C. is that Trump was preparing to announce last night an invasion of Venezuela. But the negative outcry from about noon to nighttime, prompted by people such as Tucker Carlson and anti-war, was so potent, White House advisors warned him off it, delaying any such announcement. You can see anti-war right there. Trump doesn't mention Venezuela war plans in his evening address. And of course, we're going to go into that a little bit more as Trump still is thirsting for the ouster of Nicolas Maduro and the acquisition of what he says are American lands, which should be a dispute just for the oil companies. That's all. And as the United States still allows Chevron tankers to move. Why? Because the United States has a deal with Chevron. Let's continue. Trump spent 18 minutes tooting his own economic horn instead. Of course, he filled the time with self-congratulatory lies and half-truths, avoiding key data points and avoiding his own oath to protect and defend his Constitution. Right there with Medicaid and Medicare. Right there. You've got a guy who's following up from FDR onward with absolute ridiculous nonsense. FDR to Johnson to Trump. You got three big stones in the welfarist state, and Trump is still supporting the welfarist nonsense that is unsupportable for anybody who swears an oath to the Constitution. Trump touted rapid economic progress under his administration. And don't forget, on his first day of Christmas, of the 12 days of federal Christmas, he promoted and celebrated the Works Progress Association. And now he's touting rapid economic progress. You should be able to define what is progress for yourself, not Donald Trump applauding an unconstitutional make-work program from the FDR era. Well, he claimed he inherited soaring prices from the Biden era, but was now driving them down dramatically. So let's look at some of his key assertions. First, gasoline prices are falling sharply, implying averages under $2.50 a gallon nationally, with some rates at $1.99. Also claiming that groceries and egg prices are plummeting. Egg prices down 82% since March. Thanksgiving turkey down significantly, they tell us. How about car prices and hotel rates and airfares declining quickly? And inflation stopped. All these claims in 18 minutes. Inflation stopped after they said it was the worst in history, and wages are rising faster than costs. Your purchasing power is going up, just like we heard that guy Hassett mention. Yes, and then we actually told the truth that he didn't tell. And he says a record 18 trillion, probably his biggest fish story, and it stinks from the head, it rots from the head. $18 trillion in record new investments secured, largely via his tariff threats, bringing factories home to America. Why would they leave? Oh, that's right, because of the regulatory and tax state, and because they can't trust anybody in Washington, and they know how mercurial you are. Well, let's get into it. Many claims are misleading. This is the type of stuff I do for MRC TV, or used to do all the time. You'd see Biden, you'd see him make a claim, you'd see AOC make a claim. Now you get to do it with Trump. It's so different, right? Well, national gas prices averaged, as I mentioned yesterday, less a year ago than they do now. Yep, national gas, and this is the AAA website, gasprices.AAA. So you can just click over there if you're interested. You can do that inside the news notes. So AAA always keeps tabs. I don't know why Donald Trump, maybe he's not a member of AAA. I don't know. Not sure about that. Hey, Donald, are any of your chauffeurs or Air Force One flight guys, maybe you should have gotten that from the Adelsons. Can APAC give you a AAA membership? You've accepted pretty much everything else. Well, yeah. National gas prices averaged $2.90 a gallon on December 18th, today, far above Trump's amplified figures, with no states, zero states, averaging $1.99. And inflation stood, the new numbers are out, at between 2.7 and 3% year over year. It just came in at 2.7. They usually revise it upwards a month later, so it will probably be 2.9%. And year over year, it came in at just about the same as it was when Trump took office, at about 3%. Yes, it wasn't halted, and there was no inherited historic peak. It peaked at 9.1% in 2022. Grocery prices actually rose. That's right. They rose year over year. And the egg drop reflected the recovery from the so-called avian flu peaks, which were really fake PCR claims of flu and government orders to cull millions of birds. They weren't declines in prices brought about by productivity gains or lower overhead. Wage growth marginally outpaced inflation, not much faster, with average hourly earnings up 3.5% year over year, far below real inflation, which is about 10% or more in November, but slowing to just 0.1 monthly amid broader labor market weakness. And again, the buying power canard is something I want to address again this week, because they're not including the unemployed. I said, you'll see here, slowing to just 0.1%. That's hourly earnings monthly amid broader labor market weakness. And that does not include higher numbers of unemployed. Unemployment has risen over the past few months, reaching 4.6% in November, a 4-year high, up from 4.3% in August, signaling a crashing job market with payroll growth stalling since April. As a result, the so-called wage measurements by the government are useless. The unemployed are not counted in wage rate statistics, which focus solely on employed workers. How, like, when that guy, Kevin Hassett, was on the Squawk Box on CNBC, right? Why didn't somebody say, hey, how can you say this? You have no idea what real earning is because you haven't included the unemployed. They're earning zero. Big goose egg, eggs. The $18 trillion figure, well, that overstated a lot, of course, of the investments, mostly from businesses that are being forced, otherwise known as extortion, to shift operations into the U.S. to avoid Trump's tariff terrorism. In turn, meaning, as I said, when he first announced his first one with Honda moving back in from Mexico to build an EV plant in Tennessee, in turn, meaning that the investments are not being made on the back of decisions regarding real productivity, but because of government coercion. This isn't investment, it's extortion. So here's CNN with a good X-based check. I've put in a lot of the links for different things, like the fact check from the New York Times on his transcript. This is another link to the CNN page that actually has that video embedded. But here is a little bit more. Let's go with this one. This is from X. I think you'll find it worthwhile. And it has been re-X'd. Terminator exit. Here we go. Yep. Harry Enton fact checks Trump's unhinged speech, and it really was out of control.
We started off talking about affordability and prices and the idea that prices are coming down. But we can just look at the inflation rate year over year, Caitlin, and what can we see? Back in January, the inflation rate, according to CPI, was 3.0%. You saw by April, it was dipping down. It was 2.3%. That was right around the time that the tariffs really started to get implemented. Look at where we are now in the latest reading, September. We'll get another reading out, I believe, tomorrow. But the latest reading we get out, 3%. That matches where we were in January, Caitlin. Prices have not, in fact, fallen according to the broadest measure of the inflation rate. He also spoke about jobs, right? Well, you know, John King was talking about the unemployment rate. Look, in January, it was 4.0%. By May, 4.2%. Now, the latest reading that was out earlier this week, 4.6%, the highest unemployment rate since 2021. Now, these are the measures of the economy, right? But how do Americans actually feel about it? And all I can say is they feel awfully about it, because take a look here. Percentage who say that we're on the right track when it comes to inflation, just 20%, just 20% of Americans say we're on the right track. The vast majority of Americans think we're on the wrong track when it comes to inflation. What about jobs? Just 27% of Americans think we're on the right track when it comes to jobs in this country. So we're talking about under 30% on two key economic metrics. And then I'll leave you with this, Caitlin Collins, and that is Donald Trump's economic net approval rating. It is just flat out awful, and it has declined precipitously since the beginning of his second term in office. Look at this. Trump's net approval rating on the economy. In January, he was in positive territory at plus 6%. Way down he goes. Now, according to the latest Reuters Ipsos poll, he is 25 points underwater. Donald Trump was elected to fix the economy. It was a strength for him during his first term, but at this point, it is an anchor on him, and that is why we're seeing poll after poll after poll showing him with a net negative approval rating, and in some polls, the worst approval rating he has had in his entire second term.
Right on. Well said. Now, he went through that quickly, so hopefully doing it a couple times. And of course, if you want to refer to the news notes, feel free. All that information's there. All the links are there. So if this is a historical moment for you, you want to be able to go back and check this over, tell people about this, send them convincing links to show them the information and show them that Donald Trump is just spouting nonsense, lyrical drivel, article sewer. You can also, again, you can share that with them. X is a very, very good platform to share stuff so quickly. And I haven't been censored all that much, so that's kind of nice. I appreciate that. I want to talk a little bit more about inflation. Of course, inflation, as measured by the government, really is not inflation. As von Mises said, people used to understand that inflation was a term used for the inflation of the money supply by a government or a government-granted monopoly of a central bank, of fiat currency. And when people say fiat, that means put onto you by government fiat, mandated. So fiat currency, inflation, expansion of the money supply. And unfortunately, as we know, that dilutes the buying power of all the units that are out there. And the people who get the money first can take advantage of the fact that the prices have not been bid up, and they'll get the assets. Then, of course, a lot of people have expectations of doing very well. They misallocate the money. They enter into the moral hazards of hiring new people because they expect greater interest in their products, of expanding their businesses, putting more into their warehouses, applying more human, temporal, and natural resources to things, and they just sit there because people end up not buying them. They pull back. All that stuff's got to be liquidated. It should never have been turned into those types of things and put into the warehouses in the first place. But people had irrational expectations. And of course, it causes a temporal warping of the supply curve. It increases people's interest in bringing in supply because they think they can sell it because there's easy money out there. All of these things are poison, and they're all absolute aberrations from anything that would happen in a natural market. People don't operate it that way in a natural market. So when we hear the term inflation, let's talk about the real inflation of the money supply that caused price increases. The U.S. government, which told us they were shut down for most of October through November 12th, one wonders how the federal bureaucracy can measure inflation. Inflation already has occurred. These would be the price increases due to the inflation of the money supply. Well, you got it. Here's the latest CPI report. Shows the inflation rate rose at a 2.7% pace. As I mentioned earlier, that actually looks like it's more like 3%. CPI was expected to rise 3% on it. That's the Consumer Price Index on an annual basis last month, according to economists surveyed by financial data firm FactSheet. In the most recent inflation reading from September, the CPI rate rose 3% on an annual basis. That's year to year. So it'll probably be revised upward to about 2.9% or 3%. So Donald Trump is not doing anything better for you. He's making it harder for you to buy products by decreasing the supply of them coming into the country and increasing the cost of them with the biggest tax increase in 70 years through his tariffs. So this news is spreading. The news likely will see, unfortunately, the Federal Reserve lower rates again in a few weeks. Since the government granted monopoly of the Fed and the vast debt of the U.S. both rule over the buying power of our money, it's key to be aware of their terminology. The Fed funds rate is the interest rate at which banks lend reserve balances to each other overnight because they have to balance their sheets. They used to do it once a week on Fridays. The Federal Reserve does not set a single precise rate, but instead announces a target range, which is currently 3.5 to 3.75% as of the December 10th announcement. The Fed influences the actual market rate, known as the effective federal funds rate. And that is a volume-weighted median of transactions. And they do so to stay within this range using so-called tools like interest on reserve balances. That's IORB, IORB, and sort of like EOR. They're never happy. And the overnight reverse purchase agreement rate. Last week's move to lower rates to 3.5 to 3.75% was the third consecutive rate cut in 2025. The decision passed in a 9-3 vote, with some officials dissenting for no change and one favoring a larger cut. So the Mises Institute has something that I want to show you. I'm not going to dive too deeply into it, but yeah, as you would think, Austrian economists are warning people, and I want to warn people. November's weak jobs report is probably going to push the Fed towards more monetary stimulus. What's that going to do? That'll push the price of gold and silver way up. The Bureau, and of course, the price of oil is going to be going up because of what's going on with Venezuela. The Bureau of Labor Statistics finally released its November report. Again, I don't know how they put that together because half the month was destroyed after a nearly 10-day delay. And the latest data shows that the unemployment situation in America continues to slowly worsen. During November, the unemployment rate increased to a 50-month high of 4.6%, even though total payrolls rose by 64,000 from October to November. Overall, November's report showed lackluster payroll growth fueled by rising numbers in part-time employment. Although the Bureau of Labor Statistics is apparently back on track with its November report, following the partial federal shutdown, some key sections of the October report, especially from the household survey, have not been circulated or published. So month-to-month comparisons are difficult for the October-November period. Instead, much of what I look at here will be comparisons between September and November to allow for comparisons between the establishment survey and the payroll survey. So look at this. This is the unemployment rate, month by month. This is 2021, January 1st of 2021 through January 1st of 2022, right there. Okay. So if you're listening, that's going down. Up and down, down most of the time in a curve. Then we see 2023, 2024, March starts going up. Maintains at about that level. And then as we see March of 2025, really, March of 2025 starts going up. Pretty much steady going up right through to November for unemployment. And again, with an increasing population, even when you get rolls of people who are the large numbers of employed, with a larger population, you should see more job opportunities and you shouldn't see unemployment. You should see decreasing unemployment. This is not good. Not good at all. Donald Trump should be ashamed of himself saying such stupid stuff. Now let's get into more of the warfare coverage, everybody, and get your thoughts before we go into the warfare. As Christmas rolls around, let me ask you this question, and drop your comments inside X if you want them seen on the screen, or inside Rumble, and we'll say hi to the crowd, to the group, to the fellow conspirators. Have you changed your behavior this Christmas? Or did you change it even last Christmas or the year before because of the economic situation? Whether it was personal or it's overall, your spidey senses going off. Are you making different decisions about your spending? And to add to it, what is your prognosis over the next quarter and next 2 quarters for the U.S. economy under Donald Trump? And finally, are you affronted? Do you feel insulted by this crass commercialism on the part of Donald Trump to sell you essentially a materialist holiday a week before Christmas with lies? Let's turn to X Chat and Rumble Chat. Say hi to everybody inside Rumble. Skunk Hollow is there. Dustin Helm is there. Centurion Blood. Yes. We've got, he says, thank Christ I bought silver at 20 to 27 an ounce. You know, thinking about that makes me think about the Romans and Christ being sold for 30 ounces. MOE, thanks for being there, man. Says, I feel insulted by the very existence. Oh, isn't that good? I feel insulted by the very existence of government. And, you know, some people might think, oh, how dare you? Again, does MOE have a right to be free or not? If he does, then the state itself is an affront to his freedom. And he is righteously indignant. Good job. Appreciate that, man. Deb McCarthy says, the grand illusion with Trump and his economic reports. Yeah, again, a little Styx reference, right? And Harry Hart is mentioning gold is leveling out. Skunk buys silver. Fudge numbers, says Skunk. Yep. Emily says the sheep just need to vote harder. Yeah, just as I say, you know, when I play the new Christs with lower yourself, just keep voting. Surely it'll get better.